So I technically didn't complete this one since the Dragon Quest spoof section just crashes on me. Either it's my PC, though it's most likely just that I installed it incorrectly. Honestly, I was kind of glad that happened since I was just tired of playing this fucking VN, and I'll get to that why later. I did finish the main stuff, and it took a while considering you have to play the whole damn game for each character if you want everything. It's edited MTL, generally something you wouldn't want, but also unless you're gonna spend a lot of time trying to learn the damn language, usually it's not gonna come out with any English anywhere. At the most you get a fan translation, and then even that's kind of rare at this point. I would have said the same thing with Soft House Shower with the Bunny Black stuff, but apparently they did drop out one, which was the Dungeon Master Kira crap, which, you know, isn't the main title. It's supposed to, hey, it's something, so maybe, but maybe didn't sell well either, so who knows. The plot is basically OG SMT light, just not that interesting overall. The main protagonist called Shuya. He's in a random town that's relatively run by MHI. MHI has the leading advances in most fields, though mainly medical, like basic materials and weaponry. And they used most of their new advancements toward their new plane or war jet, whatever it is, that single-handedly competes with other countries' armies. It's super OP and thus is a plot device. Shui goes to one of the MHI schools and wants to be a doctor since he and his sister were saved by their medical breakthroughs. You meet most of the cast, but most importantly his two best friends Kaito and Akari. Hijinks happen, Shui and the posse gets warped into the distorted world and what you're basically going to see for the majority of the game. Shuya finds his friends, finds his cube. The cube is dumb and a temporary MacGuffin. I'm not even gonna go up because it's like a 10-line thing, so whatever, you just ignore it. They find the boss, he gets his ass handed to him and learns that he has the power of blood manipulation. That's a whole other thing that's super important later on. It's all spoilers. probably not gonna go over it. It's just part of the plot. They win and they want to leave now, but it's like, oh fuck, this part's pretty dangerous, so they find a way out with someone else's help, but regularly just come back until more of the town gets warped into this other area, and they have to find a new exit because the primary exit they're using just are gone. Soon enough, they see angels and demons, and by the end of chapter 3, you choose what side you want to be on. You can be on the angel side devils or just be on humans and be on your own. Unlike other games where you actually take a mentality of your chosen faction, you just side with them and try to find a way to get back to your own normal world. You're just kind of there. The angel route is probably the easiest, but if you know what you're doing, then the human route is actually kind of easier since you can just cheese the final boss, and most of the other boss fights are more like scripted where you fight with custom decks, so you don't really have to build your own. The devil route didn't feel all that hard either, except outside of maybe one specific custom deck, because by that time when I was playing, my normal decks were just fucking OP, so like why am I using this shitty ass deck now? And since I just talked about decks and all that, this actually uses a different battle system from the rest of these shelly stuff. Or at least a lot of them were just like dungeon crawling, or you have your SRPGs and all that. This one, it's a whole card battle shit. It's kind of neat, but also really boring for a long time. On your first playthrough, you'll maybe have like one grade 4 card, and the rest are just grade 1 and 2s, and a few 3s eventually. The problem is most of the grade 1 and 2s don't have either. They either have like no abilities or shitty ass abilities and passives. Also, the grade 1 and 2 cards generally get one shot, so you get pissed off a lot. There's outliers, and you'll use some of them. It's like, oh, this one's pretty good, but most of them are just ass. And even the good ones are normally from like plot related stuff where you're doing events from your classmates and all that shit, not the ones you captured. It's like, oh, these are just garbage. And I think a good part of that's because, well, if you play the angel route first, which is what you're kind of supposed to do, the demon decks are kind of shit for the most part until you get to like the grade 4, 5, and 6 crap. There's also specific decks you can make, but that's also, again, on your second or third playthrough because you really need very specific cards to make them work. You have a leader card, and for the most part, that's going to be Shuya, the main character, outside of like a few events in every route where it's like, oh, you're using a custom deck, like I said. And also, you can unlock the other characters after post-game if you do this Dream Palace, which is like the new game plus content. But at that point, you already unlocked the best card of the main character, which is overall better than everything else because not that he has the good passive or good ability in it, but he has more control stat on it. Because control is more useful than anything else. Since controls needs to summon higher grade cards, grade 1 and 2 only give 1 control each. You generally want to do a triangle formation or an inverse of it, and then you can summon grade 3 cards, and then you circle around, so then you have triangle of 3 grade cards, so then you can at least summon like grade 6 cards. There's also grade 7 and 8 cards, but it's not really feasible until New Game Plus. Technically, there is a way with the FAs, or with items if you get from New Game Plus shit. And the FAs is like your last piece. It's your finisher move for every character you have. Overall, you can use them maybe like twice per boss fight, but since the charge rate is kind of long. There are other cards that boost your charge rate, and I think there's one specific FA that increases your charge rate as well. Though, technically, if you have like an attrition build, that you can also build more that way. I used one for a while, it's actually pretty funny, but I'll get to it. They all have different abilities. Some do decent unit damage, some do lower AoE damage, some heal. There's a lot of niche ones that can be useful for a fight or two, and some I see like no purpose for. And there's other ones that looks like they completely replace a different freaking FA. They also use the XP gauge to level them up, and some of them you really need to level them up because otherwise they're useless. Honestly, you can ignore the FA for the most part. I think I beat the whole first freaking playthrough without it because it's not very useful. Because it's all level 1 shit, and maybe even level 2, and it's not that great at that point. So for the FAs, generally speaking, you always want Madoka on for the majority of your fights, not because their particular FA is actually even good. It's fine, it heals a lot, and if you max it out, you can heal like 100 HP on your leader card. Which is, you know, it saves like 4 to 5 turns. You have 4 or 5 turns more, maybe 3 depending on the boss fight. But really it's because she increases the XP gain per fight, so she's responsible for leveling everybody else's FAs. And you really need that because even though you're going to do a lot of playthroughs, it's going to be a pretty rough time to max everybody out if that's your thing, right? Kaito lowers NVFA gauge, but also has the same issue where it'll only be decent in a few fights, and it's also going to only delay slightly until you level up a lot. And at that point, you really don't need his FA gauge anymore either, so what's the point, right? Then there's Ikari's FA. I think this one's translated badly or something because otherwise it's just total garbage. Because all it does is, I think it disables you from movement, but it doesn't disable you from summoning, so what's the fucking point of it? It's kind of garbo. Shuyi is the single unit damage crap. It's also really shit because at the beginning, I think it only does like 6 damage, and by the end, it only does 30. When every like final boss has like 200, 300 HP, it's not very useful. I would never go with it. Mirai's FA is actually used for specific fights, but it's not really like those cards were free anyway. It basically copies the last X amount of units from the enemy team that you destroyed from, right? So let's say they have like, oh, they have a grade 7 card and they had like 40 attack. You can summon that from theirs. But the thing is, you still need to do the control shit, so it's not really that useful as you think it is. I feel like if this had PvP or something, I think Mirai's card would be a lot more useful in that case. Harisa's FA sounds whatever, but it's actually one of the most OP ones. Even at level 1, just having a turn where you have 3 like grade 1 cards and grant you a grade 6 freaking monster is amazing. It's the only time it's possible to get your grade 8 outside of consumables or your specific accessories, which I think you can only get from New Game Plus content, or at least the accessories. I think consumables you can just get whenever. Technically, you can make a build of like only 6 or 7 cards and just have like, okay, I need 2 1 grade cards, 2 3 grade cards, and then like another 2 or 3 6 or 7 cards, and you'll work out fine. Chanel's FA is kind of shit. It heals your normal cards, but overall you wouldn't waste an FA for it. She does have a great passive if you build a deck around like 3 friends, but otherwise not that great. Sayane as a whole is a fucking gimmick. All her cards and even her FA is about fucking both you up and the enemy at the same time. You can make some pretty cool builds off of it, but it's really ballsy. Her FA specifically lowers the leader on both sides HP by like 50 to I think 70% or something. So if you have a shitty card of like 80 HP and they have 300, sure they're getting screwed up a lot more than yours, but overall it's like I'd rather just have other cards for it. And then there's Atori's FA, which is mainly just used for very specific builds where I think it's more of a demon build thing, but there are some angel builds for it as well where the whole thing is like you have these units that discard other cards to do shit for you, so he does more damage or buffs whoever's in front of you or heals people. At this point, Atori's FA will resummon all your discarded cards back into your deck. When you cap out, you freaking resurrect all 30 cards you can resurrect all 30 cards back in, so it's kind of OP in that case, but overall you can't summon the grade 8 cards, and depending on how you build your shit, eventually you never have to discard anything anyway because the enemy team just can't kill what you're having. So otherwise I think it's very useful early on to mid game, but by the end you don't need any more. So the FAs are done. There are more, but they're like devil route stuff, and I think some are human route. The ones I'm skipping are the ones you're never going to use because either you're too late game or you already have better ones anyway. There's one that's decent where it makes your opponent drop like all cards they're holding except like 3 for a couple turns, and that's kind of OP, I guess. But also I think when the append 1 cards also does that as well, so it's like whatever. So throughout all that, main importance is how much does the card cost and how much does the card gives you on control. Going through the plot lets you get new versions of the leader character, and you're never going to go back to your older versions. There's some really fucking amazing cards, but most of them are fluff. So like I'm dropping all the devil cards because I don't see them as being useful. I know you can make some builds and I can be proven wrong. It's like, I actually, if you do this style, it's actually really OP. But overall, I don't care. They're not my style. The easiest deck is going to be the attrition deck, but you're either going to need to finish the devil route or you're going to have to finish the Dream Palace like New Game Plus content. It's a generic angel deck that can be put in a lot of random shit, but you only need like 2 or 3 Elmir cards. The Elmir cards just returns all your discarded cards back into your deck, so you don't even FA at that point. And all you're gonna need is like 2 or 3. So when you summon one and it dies, you can just summon the other one. It's like, oh, the other Elmir cards back into your deck, so then you can just resummon these things and they'll never fucking die. Kind of broken that way. Really, that card is meant to be used in conjunction with like more like a solely Rufadil deck or something, because all she does is like, oh, I need to discard cards to do direct damage to the leader. It's really shit damage, so I'd go against it anyway. You can couple it with some other cards that discard any cards to summon like grade 3 monsters as well. They're not great, but they have uses for it, especially when the cards in your hand are just too high grade for you to be able to use. So it's like, oh, you're just fucked. The easiest card you can get that's also kind of really OP is if you complete Chanel's route. This card heals everybody in your fucking team as long as she's in the back. It's the only card that makes a full deck full of like 7 to 6 to 8 grade monsters and nothing else viable, because you never have to resummon them. They're just gonna be there for the whole time. So I know like one grade 8 card has like 28 health and very few monsters, and I think there's only like 2 boss monsters can do that. So at that point, Chanel will always keep that fucking character alive. And then you can couple that with like the Arterial bad card that increases all devils HP by 3. So if you do a whole devil card and just have one Chanel in there, now you have even more increased HP sheet on it. There's probably more cards that also increase HP by normally as well. Like I know there's one devil card specifically that raises their HP but lowers their attack, depending on how many monsters the enemy team summons, right? So if you have Chanel really early on and you can summon that really early on, right, and they don't have like a lot of 3 stars and the stupid ass Dean can actually survive, eventually he'll have so much fucking OP, nothing can beat him even though he has like 1 damage or 0 damage. He'll just be your tank. The card that you can get if you finish the Dream Palace is also kind of good. It's not the most OP like Chanel, but it does deal an automatic 5 damage even though you're in the back. And that seems kind of shit, but normally everybody in the back does nothing. They're normally buff cards than anything else. There are specific cards you can equip them that's like, oh, if there's no one in front, they can attack like they were, like if they were in the front, but they're not. So you're safe from being damaged and all that shit. But normally you do have everybody in front anyway, so this card is kind of useless because of that. I don't really use it, but I do see uses and I see how it can be useful. There are specific Arista cards that have a passive to remove enemy cards as long as you discard 1 card. It's not the most amazing shit because like, well, they're still going back into their enemy deck. It's not like, oh, it's going to the discarded pile. But the thing is, there's very specific fights where they have like, oh, I have a 40 attack card or I have a 32 health card and stuff. And you're like, I don't want to deal with this shit right now, because normally they're like grade 6 or grade 7 shit. And you're like, just go back into the fucking deck. Fuck you. I don't want to deal with it. And it's kind of OP for that. And one of the least OP shit that I have, but still kind of used for very niche fights, where it's the Madoka cards have like, well, any indirect damage cannot hurt her at all, right? And there's like 2 super fights, which they're all optional, right? But you get a stronger card if you fight them, and it's like, oh, all he does like, oh, I do 8 damage in a fucking row, but it's not direct damage, all indirect damage. So you can just have like all those 3 cards set up in there, and you'll eventually just win the fight because there's just another card of attrition shit. So I mentioned Cyan is fucking stupid shit before. All it is like, well, a lot of cards reduces enemy cost by 1. And I think there's like 2 or maybe 3 cards where it's like, hey, if your cost is 0, she can't get hurt. So you can make a whole stupid build where they lower every enemy to like 0 cost. So then it's just a very long fight. I don't recommend this at all. I'm assuming it's probably like 1 stupid fight where this is the most broken shit ever, because otherwise I don't see why they made all of these cards for this. It's just a ballsy ass setup for something that'll just take forever. There's some basic ass Kaito cards where it looks like they're useless, and they kind of are, but you can equip them with like an item which is, I think it's like the Derringer or something. All it does is like, well, if the card grade is like 3 or under, it'll just automatically kill it. So you can have like a level 1 card kill a level 3 card. It's like, hey, that's kind of OP, and all you're doing is like, well, they're just there to be fodder to summon your 3-star card anyway. So I was like, hey, it's a good trade-off. Kill 1 3 or even 2 3-stars as well. Hey, good job. And there's also a different card which is like the basic bitch MSC soldier, where it's like the complete opposite, where it does like no damage. I think it has like 2 health and 2 damage. But things like when it dies, it draws an extra card for you. So if you put 2 of them down and you use them to get a 1-3 or grade 3 card, it's like, well, now I got my 3-star card out there and also 2 extra cards, and it's okay, it's kind of free. There's also a very specific card in Narumi's deck where it's like the enemy does odd damage to you, right? You take no damage, so it's just a 0, and it's kind of useful for very specific fights and a lot of things. Like there's a Mirai card that also, or at least a couple of them, where if you attack them or they attack the Mirai card, they get blood control debuff on them, which is -1 attack. So you can set up where the boss will now only have an odd freaking number. And you can set up so like, well, now nothing can kill the stupid boss anymore. So it's kind of OP in that kind of scenario. But this counteracts with a different card that she has where it's like, well, you summon it and it can't get hurt because all the damage will be transferred to the main character, which then counteracts even a different card because that one is based on the leader's HP. So it's a Narumi card where if you're cheating or use a cheat dungeon to get 200 HP or something, she does like 50 damage per hit or whatever. And also, even if you're not cheating, it's like a 40 damage per hit. It's fucking broken at that point because it's just a grade 6 card, but also does a lot of damage for it. So a lot of these things where you're like, some are good, some are not, depending on how you build is going with it. So now that I got all of that out of the way, there's going to be some spoilers here and there, but overall it should be fine even if you want to try play it for yourself. There are a spoiler section later on, it's very light shit, because all it is really me complaining about a lot of random shit that's happening that's pissing me off. So the largest issue that it has is that the character routes themselves suck for the most part, and that's because the 3 paths barely change at all. I think the only time it actually changes in the human path if you choose Mirai. There's like one very specific conversation, and for some reason that one changes, but nothing in the fucking angel route changes, and pissed me off, and I'll get to it. Basically, the game doesn't take almost anything into consideration on your choices. So for example, like the first shard I did was Arisa. She and Chanel are Mirai's friends. They're generally always together. I was trying to hit Madoka's route first, but Marissa's quest line is like a collectathon, and I didn't want to bother doing it again, so I just chose it. Then one of her scenes actually sold me. It's like, hey, in retrospect, I think this is probably one of the better scenes or the better routes in the bunch in this fucking thing, outside like the new game plus content, because normally that's like decent. And possibly maybe Mahisha, I think Arisa does it better, but Mahisha overall it's better. Anyways, you're by the end of the angel route and all the groups are doing their own pep talks, because that's like another usually thing that they do. And the one with the sister group is both Arisa and Mirai scheming how to make Shuya fall for Chanel. But why would that happen? This dialogue happens if you pick Chanel as well, or even any other character is so fucking stupid. It should be just like a flag check, and it's not. This is also the case if you go for Akari in the same angel route, because she also does some shit. It's like, how does this make any sense? And also the case for Madoka where she jokes that she knows Shu's fooling around, and he gets surprised like, oh shit, she found out. And that would have been the case if it was the first route, because I went everywhere and I got a lot of scenes. But in this one, I was speedrunning and there was nothing happening. So at that point, it's like, no, I wasn't. What the fuck are you talking about? It's bullshit. It's the game itself assumes you did it, or you're doing all these events when you just didn't. Devil Route also has this issue, just in a different sense, because in Devil Route a lot of it's like 90% harem shit, and in this path the harem is a forced default unlike the other two. But you can also get Akari or Cyane's ending in here, but the harem ending still plays out after that one's done, and it's like, oh, okay, weird, whatever. So the gist is that even if you want to finish every character's route and collect their cards, you still have to beat the game from the start a total of like 9 times, alongside finishing the new game plus content at least once in one of these runs, and also not miss ending in the Devil Route because there's like 3 missable scenes. And that's also assuming you didn't pick Narumi as the first route, because there's a fucking hard ass fight for one of her last scenes that she can get, and I don't think you like, it's possible to win, but it's very fucking hard. It's a lot easier if you get new game plus content. I did not. It was kind of pissing me off, but I got it. You know, I won. It was fine, but that was still my second play, or maybe it was my 3rd playthrough. But overall, I was like, yeah, it's possible, but you're just gonna have a bad time with it. So it's just better to leave Narumi for the human path. Also, some characters are locked to specific paths, which isn't a really bad idea, but also has a lot of favoritism going on. There's no real unique hero for the human route. The best you can get is a different age scene for Narumi, because she's also still available in the angel route. Madoka and Mahisha are just locked in angel, and Sayane is locked in devil. It's mainly in the sense that some routes have more events for certain characters, or they arrive earlier, and with that, it's like, oh no, now you have enough points to go into a route. I'll cover parts of who I personally restrict to what route or to what path in the spoiler section. The worst part of it all is you can't skip any fight with a custom deck. they should be skippable after you finish the route once. Because in the first round, it makes sense because they're around the same power level as the main character at that point. But later on, you're so fucking more OP, but when you get that custom dex, it gets also back to this garble character. Like, why am I still using this crap again? I feel like the Angel route had the most shit going on in terms of like combat and minigames. Even speeding through all of it will take you like 3 to 4 hours. The third chapter is the worst. There's a minigame where you have to prevent the devils from going upstairs because you're in the school thing, right? And there's like 3 sets of units going all around, and you have helpers, which is like your students going on. And all of that's RNG because sometimes you don't have to do shit. Sometimes you could just, peace out and the students take care of it. But there was one run specifically where all my fucking units, because you can't control them, they're just there, they were all dying. So I had to do like 12 fights in a row before the boss even happens. And that boss actually fucking hard in the first run because it has way more HP than you have. So it's just one of those things where it's like, it would be nice if there was a quality of life update where it's like, hey, you already did this? Yeah, just press the skip button. I don't care. And that'd be great. But no, you have to do this every time. So you're going to want to enter the cheat dungeon to get the extra leader HP. I think it's like a 50% upgrade, so you can auto the random encounters. You might also want to do that in the first run just to save yourself some frustration. I remember I was mauling in a few boss fights again because they have way more HP than I had and they have better cards than I have overall. And I think that they kind of cheat because it feels like, oh, they have more cards than I do or they're drawing more cards than I do. And it could be like the innate passive, like, well, if they kill one of my units, they get a new card because I have that if I equip an item. But they all have that. You also start with multiple units on the field. Sometimes it's a full fucking roster and you consider it's like, oh, the enemy actually gets the first turn, but they can't attack you, so that's why they stack all the monsters in. But nope, they all have like grade 3 cards or grade 4 to 6 cards. Like, how the fuck did you get these grade 6 card when everything else, like, you have only 2 control, none of these cards are 2 or under. There's no way to build this deck with this. This is bullshit. You're lying to me. The main routes themselves are kind of boring, especially the human route where it felt like nothing was actually happening until the last chapter. Then it felt somewhat rushed, even though it was really cool. What do you even say it's really cool? It's really cool in comparison to everything else that was happening. This is also where they give a peek to the New Game Plus content. It was probably my favorite part until I saw the new content itself. Because you don't know what was talking to you. This unknown being could have been the player treated as a different species. It could have just been a higher being or even like a fourth wall break from the company itself. Anyways, it's not like nothing else was happening throughout the whole route. It just, a lot of these big deals didn't feel like big deals at all because you just confront them and they die. The other thing in the Angel route, when you go to the fort and you had to go to this like MHI crypt, this thing took a long ass time. It was huge. I don't know why, a battle between the angels, the devils, and you is like 1/3 of the length. It made no sense. The Devil route is kind of generic and it's more of a horny section, but introduces a few decent ideas. It covers things that the other routes just alluded to, and also explains how the MCU are just getting stat boosts of like that magnitude. And you can say it's all bullshit and they just added that in there to explain the H scenes away. And that's mainly true, but it was also covered partly in Chanel's route, and it explains away what was happening in Arissa's route as well. This happened in other routes in lesser degrees like Akari's power-ups and possibly that angel ritual, which is kind of bullshit and they're just covering it up. And that was a theme that was going on in the background for quite a bit throughout the routes where, yeah, the devils are assholes, but you know what's going on and you know where you're getting into if you join with them. The angels are just being cordial since humans are just useful tools. Sure, the cast befriends them, but this is also when they're already invaluable. If the humans randomly lost their powers, they'd be probably dumped into the city and just forgotten about. And it's not like this is a very hidden thing or very like, oh, I'm a super genius. Like, this is very apparent in what they're doing. Part of me saw the human section as like the true route since it's combining ideas from the other two. But then again, the background image when loading the game up is a CG from the Devil's route. So I was like, hey, is it that or is it this? But it was all pushed aside in the Dream Palace New Game Plus content shit. Basically all routes happened at the same time kind of thing. So they're technically all the true route in a way. My favorite character was Gilzil. Too bad he's only really enjoyable in the human route, but that could just be the case for him being enjoyable in small doses. If he's around too much, maybe got annoying, and I think that's what was happening in the Devil route. There's also not much going on with him in the Devil route itself. I assumed there'd be more with it. Just here and there and just kind of annoying. You'd assume there'd be a bigger deal or a bigger like reveal, but nothing really happens. My favorite of the normal cast is Madoka, and then maybe Mahisha. Though Sayane is overall the most interesting character, where her alliance and what she's doing is determined what Shui is doing or what he chose during like chapter 2 and 3. And I'll cover that in the spoilers. Overall, I gave this a 6. If you only do the 3 routes or the 3 paths and not all the fucking characters, then I put it as a 7. The deck building is fun, but only after a run or two. And the first one will take the majority of your whole playing time, so you're basically just stuck with a boring build longer than not. The whole NG Plus content was really fun, honestly. It was pretty easy compared to the other titles, NG Plus stuff. It needs a few quality of life updates to speed up the process as well, but overall, it's fine. It was a fun ride, I guess. You should pick whatever character you like the most, but if you want one of the better cards, then you should do Chanel's route first. She was the second to last for me, and it was kind of a pretty big kick in the balls because, like, damn, this very OP card, I never got to use it for much of anything. So this is spoilers. You can leave now. It'll be like in 2 seconds. So I mentioned that some characters are locked behind different paths, and part of that's because depending on scenario, you just don't have enough time to interact as much with certain characters. And the prime example, Sayane and Madoka. Madoka gets her arm blown off and Shuya becomes her assistant for a while. Most of her cards come from that route too. In the other routes, she's more of just a scout and that's it. Arissa doesn't get her route in the devil section, I think, because there's like 1 or 2 locations just blocked off. You can't access them, and they have like required items that you need for her. Chanel's blocked off because her ending mentions her grieving over the creature that she bonds with. And in Angel on the Earth path, it's like, well, they got transported back into the normal world, but all the other creature stuff stays on the distorted world, right? The devil world, I think you can just follow that, so that's why I think they blocked it all together. It's like, nah, just fuck, I don't want to deal with it. I think Narumi or Mirai's routes have like no reason to have their routes blocked off into devil faction at all. Personally, I think it'd be better if Arista, Mirai, and Narumi were locked off into the human route, having Chanel, Mahisha, and Madoka being locked off in the angel path, and Akari being just in the human route or the devil route. The only reason for that is in the angel route, there's a specific section where Kaito goes mad and also confesses to Akari, even though he knows that she likes Shuya, and that'd be fine unless you're actually doing her route, since then Kaito knows that their 2 of them are going out. Because Kaito's super chill and wouldn't do that, so it's kind of fucked up. Honestly, it's more likely for him to even go for Narumi or even the angels. There's also the Dream Palace section where I'm not even sure if it's available in every path. I may assume so, but I only did in the Angel path. I think it'd be pretty laughable if it was possible in the Devil route. And that's because the Dream Palace states that each path has happened already and has happened multiple times, and Shui gets all his memories and he knows like, oh, I hooked up with all these characters except Atori, right? And he notices as like, oh, Atori and him never ends up together. So in this case, he chooses to stay in the dream world as long as he can with her so they can deepen their relationship, since they're just going to forget when everything's over anyways. Like, well, at least with the time that they have, they'll be happy with each other, only for her to remember, and then she drops it while Shuya has like an uncanny feeling, doesn't know why he feels empty and sad, but doesn't have the bandwidth to pursue it in the angel path, right? And it works, and it kind of can't for the devil thing, and for a few reasons. Like, she wants to kill him since her dad slash creator is dead because of him, and constantly wants to fight him and just beat the shit out of him and kill him, right? Except that she loses and they end up banging to give her energy. And we'll get back to it. It makes sense, it's just kind of dumb. It's just like eroge logic, right? Anyways, in the harem ending or the devil route thing, there's orgies happening that I'm not sure what the limitations are on it, because I think Shuya restricts some from participating, like Mirai probably can't do it. But Mahisha and Atori get moved around a lot, and that's just kind of fucked up if you also follow the Dream Palace and her in that specific route. So at this point, it's like, I don't want to waste another 4 hours or 3 hours to go through the devil route to figure if that's actually happening, because the new game plus content isn't long, but it is maybe an hour long. I just don't feel like doing it anymore. It was pissing me off, right? And since I'm mentioning the devil route, I'll just skip to Sayane. She's one of the more interesting characters. Her shit is kind of inconsistent, but how it happens is pretty cool. So for the angel route, you see her with Glazel. In the human route, she's at Glazel's area and nukes the place and figures out, I was like, oh, he's not here right now, I'm gonna wait for him. So she waits, he shows up and gives news like, oh yeah, I was trying to recruit Shui over there. And she's like, oh shit, he joined the angel route. It's like, nah, he joined nobody. She's like, holy shit, that's hardcore, I'm gonna do that too. And she gets inspired to do that. And that leads her to go to MHI and do other shit, but you have to read the novel if you want to understand what's going on with that. And that points to why she was with Glazel and the Angel route altogether, because like, well, Shuya joined with the Angels at that point, so Glazel had nothing to report or nothing to say to her, so she just stayed her own path that she wanted to do. In the Devil route, she's raiding a different area, and that kind of makes sense because, well, now Glazel's inside the school with Shuya and all that guy, so she probably got tired of waiting and just went to do something else, and then they found him that way. But overall, you know, she meets up with Shuya and it's like, oh, this kid can be useful. He can be Demon King. All right, cool. I'm gonna follow him around. I'm gonna be a little shithead, but overall, it's basically like training Shuya to how to be what he ends up being. The funny thing is she has more plot going on in the human route. A lot of it is like exposition and like background info, and it helps with the character development and the relationships that she has in the devil route. Otherwise, some parts of it just loses impact without it. So like I mentioned before, in the demon route or the devil route, a lot of this things like, oh yeah, it's basically sex magic, which is like the succubus kind of thing, but apparently a lot of things do it, and Glizel's like, hey shoot, you're doing that like subconsciously. I don't know how you're doing it, but cool. And you know, that's what's happening all the time. And you know, it's like, oh, it's kind of bullshit just have more harem scenes and all that in Devil Route. But it is happening overall. It's like the Arissa thing where Arissa goes on to him, he's tied up and all that shit. But overall, it's like, was it a microchip? Whatever in her brain, like, freaking blows up. And the reason because of that is like, well, he's also doing it subconsciously again, and it increased her power and overloaded. It was overloading her microchip, so she had to delete some of her memories. And it's like a theme with a lot of these characters. Like Akari also randomly just got more powers. Chanel's creature just randomly goes berserk. That's like the one good scene in Chanel's route. And it's like, oh, that's cool. It's like, oh, Shui had to kill the creature, and then the creature fused with Chanel, and then they banged. And then and the creature got more power, and then they defused again. It was stupid, but it was funny. It's like, all right, that's kind of cool, I guess. A lot of these routes are like that, and it kind of meddles with the angel route again, because for Arterial, it's like, oh, there's this whole like sacred ritual to get the angels to be guardian angels, and it's like, I think this is just what Devil's doing all the time. You're just giving a better title for it because you don't want to be assholes. But yeah, that's about it. I gave it a 6. It's possibly a 7. I actually had fun eventually, but a lot of it's mainly like, hey, this is 120 hours or so of like content, and for a good portion of it, I was either angry or I was bored because I'm just skipping through scenes and going through the custom fights again for another like 5 times for no reason, just because I want to see everything. So a lot of this rating is based on a full completion run. If all you do is your 3 paths, yeah, it's a 7. It could even be an 8 if you like some parts of it. A lot of it was like, it's kind of generic. And this is from something that was like, I called it SMT Light. And the only SMT I played that's from the main titles is like Nocturne. And I found that way more interesting than this one. And from what I heard, I think SMT4 is the interesting one. Oh, I also played Devil Survivor. That's something else. I think this is one of the worst Usheli games that I've played. I have issues with Rhapsody as well. If you've been around for a while and you've seen my shit, you see Rhapsody is the one I never wrote about because I was just bored of it. And the combat's kind of samey, and there's a lot of things. There's a lot of cool ideas in there, but like, it's not really worth it to play it. But a lot of the scenes in that one was actually really cool. This one, some are fine. I like Madoka scenes. One Arissa scene was good. I think there was like 2 or 3 Mahish scenes, and like they're all like fine, but also all normal. You've seen them everywhere, right? It's not like Rhapsody where you have the really buff lady power drive the main character. It's like, hell yeah, that's new. One girl doesn't have legs and shit. I think she doesn't have legs. And she has like robot parts on her. It's like, oh, that's cool. You fuck the harpy lady, all right, cool. And the harpy lady, the whole point is like she doesn't know how to fly. So all in all I'm saying is like, yeah, these were fine. They're not bad, but also nothing new.